Hello, and welcome to the SMU Video Archive series. In this series, we interview members of the SMU community who can provide insight into the history of SMU, especially from the perspective of their time at the university. I'm Neil McFarland, and today we have with us Irving Baker, former professor of political science here at SMU. Irving, it is a real pleasure for me personally to have this opportunity to chat with you, because I have some responsibility for having brought you into this university to begin with. Back in the 1960s, of course, we were faced with a number of crises, social crises. Among them, of course, how to interact with the black students on our campus. You were at the time executive vice president of Bishop College, and I discovered, quite by accident, I think, your existence and your potential availability. In the faculty club, which was temporarily located here in McFarland Auditorium, I was invited by whoever was hosting you for lunch to come over and meet you. And I was so impressed, and then learned as well that you were about to resign your position at Bishop College and return to New York City. I made a quick run to the president and the administrative council of SMU and said, we cannot let this man get away as badly as we need leadership in the current crises. They authorized me to offer you a position as assistant to the president, and you took it. And I've been grateful for that ever since, and grateful also for the opportunity I had to identify such a remarkable person and to keep you here at SMU and in Dallas. Is that story essentially correct?
The flattery indeed. I remember the flattery, and that's why I came, but not really. I had an agenda, and what I saw in you was, how shall I put it, a step toward the achievement of that agenda, or at least toward meeting some of the goals on the agenda. Mm-hmm. You and Willis were responsible for my coming to SMU, because Mayor Lindsay said, I'll hold your job for you until you come back, because the politics in colleges is worse than in the city. But I wanted a different kind of experience. I wanted a different kind of administrative experience. And coming to an environment with an individual who was open, who wanted change, and who was willing to act upon his desire for change is what made me come. Mm-hmm. And so here I almost said here I am, but here I was.
Well, you mentioned Mayor Lindsay, New York City. Mm-hmm. What had been your experience there before you came south?
They had a rent control program, a very necessary program to provide protection for tenants against some landlords who were exploitative. This program had a district director who managed the housing units, if you will, or I should say the behavior of landlords and tenants, if you will, in each of the 5 boroughs. There were 6 of us. Now, there are 5 boroughs in New York, as you know, yes. But there were 6 district directors, because Manhattan had 2. Manhattan was so large. In my district, there were some 250,000 units under the control of my office. And of course, downtown had a larger number, the downtown office. My office started at 110th Street South to the end of the island, East River to Hudson River. A very large area. But what led me to seek that job, it was an appointive job, but I wanted it, was to have an opportunity to expand my own experience in housing and housing management to the city. We had some very bad landlords in New York City, and who were taking money for giving very little in return. Yes. And I wanted the opportunity to see if I couldn't make some impact for change in that kind of situation. So I was a district director, large staff, a fine staff, and that was it.
Now, while you were there, you you took a master's degree, I think, from NYU in public administration.
Yes, yes.
And were at the point of entering the doctoral program.
Right, I did enter the doctoral program, right.
And then you had the invitation to come to Bishop College, I assume.
Yes, there was a search committee for Bishop College to have an additional person to assist the president. And what triggered this was the fact that a $10,000 check, which they thought was lost on the president's desk, stacked under a pile of stuff that he hadn't gotten to. So they knew they had to have an executive vice president. And so
To take care of the $10,000 checks.
That's correct. So they had this search, and I was lucky. And my advisor, Sid Malik in New York, who was my faculty advisor for my doctoral program, he said, well, why don't you consider it and finish your doctorate down there? We want to give you the degree, though. So I accepted the position down here. Again, knowing nothing at all about the Southwest, hearing only bad things about Texas, I wanted to come to see for myself whether the things that I had heard were as bad as they were.
New York gets a lot of those stories about Texas.
Indeed, we do. But it was a wonderful experience. I wanted to get into a different kind of management experience. I wanted to learn all I could about management. And this provided another opportunity. And so I came. The experience there was not what I wanted it to be, or what I had expected it to be.
At Bishop College.
At Bishop College. I had thought that the civil rights movement was going to engender a kind of enthusiasm for helping black kids to prepare themselves for the future. But I didn't find that enthusiasm at all. What I found was indeed what Lindsay had said, a political situation where I was thought or perceived to be seeking the job of presidency. It was, as a matter of fact, where the board was grooming me to take over that job. Didn't want it at all. So I decided that since I could not make the kind of impact that I wanted to, there was no point in wasting time. I asked Sarah Hughes, Judge Sarah Hughes, who was then the chairperson of the Personnel Committee, to be released from my contract, and the board agreed. Herb Howard, who was the minister of Park Cities Baptist Church, he was the chairman of the board at the time, and he understood what was going on, and so they said, okay. That was at the beginning of my second year, and that's when I began to interact with SMU.
Yeah. So you finished 2 years at Bishop College, and then your immediate plan was to move back to New York City.
Back to New York City.
And it was at that point that I had the good fortune to discover you, I
It was
suppose.
at that point, it was my good fortune. You know, I had interacted with Joe Harris. Joe Harris was dean at the time. And
Dean of the former School of Humanities and Sciences.
that's correct. And he dispelled some of the negative attitudes or perceptions that I had of SMU. SMU in the black community did not have a good reputation at all.
No.
And Joe Harris said this. I said, well, look, we need help over at Bishop. There are courses which students want, which are not being offered. Can you help? Without any hesitation, whatever courses your students need, we will give them those courses. And we will provide transportation back and forth. I thought this was absolutely outstanding. And when I told my boss, the president, do you know what he said? He said, they, meaning SMU, will have to provide a like number of courses for us. And there we didn't have the scope of courses. Our curriculum was not that broad.
Yeah.
And so I realized then that he didn't have the kind of vision that I wanted in order to be able to carry forward the kind of mission which I had in mind for black students. And that's when I decided that I had to leave. And so the rest followed, as you said.
Yes. Now, it was in 1969, as I recall, that you assumed the position of assistant to President Willis Tate.
That's correct. And Director of
Afro-American Studies, yes.
Right, right.
Well, can you reflect on that relationship and that experience? You were in that job then for 4 or 5 years?
4 or 5 years, yeah. And somewhere in there, I became the affirmative action officer. I don't remember the exact dates now. But we say, can I reflect on the experience? Yes, I can. I realize that titles don't mean a great deal. And I realized that my being given a title of assistant to the president was very dramatic. And I realized also the kind of dangers which that title had for President Tate. And when I say dangers, what I'm talking about is the kind of scurrilous mail that he got with regard to my appointment, and the kind of scurrilous mail that I got with KKK and crosses and go back nigger, go back to New York and that sort of thing.
Oh my,
But that didn't bother me. But what did bother me was the fact that the faculty as a whole was not enthusiastic for the kind of change that you and I, or that I perceived in you as being desirable. But the experience at SMU overall was very positive, and was very positive because there were several persons on the faculty, strong persons who were committed to equality, to justice, to fairness, to educating kids, committed to what a democratic society is all about, to pluralism. And that made it worthwhile. And the students, many students would come into the class for the first time and see a black professor, out they would go, never come back.
is that right?
But the many students stayed, and it was the students really who made the experience such a wonderful experience. And as I could see SMU, having been here for 25 years, I could watch the change in the general attitude, and there was a remarkable change. The university was held in check by the outside community. That was where the pressure, the persons were giving money and all that sort of thing. They didn't want any rapid change at all. But the university itself kept pushing and pushing and pushing, let us say the personnel, and forcing the change, forcing the acceptance of change. So the experience for me was wonderful. And two, I wanted to learn something about the administration of a larger institution, a larger university, see. And it was just marvelous. And this isn't just malarkey. This is for real. This is how I felt about the school and how I still feel about it.
Well, it was our good fortune that was the approach that you took. Now, you were director of African American Studies.
Right, right.
You also taught a course in that field, did you?
Yes.
Or maybe several courses.
Several courses.
Yeah.
The course that the first contact in terms of the academic aspect of my involvement with SMU had to do with a course called Black and White. And Dr. Curry, Dr. Mary Miller.
Virginia Curry.
Virginia Curry. These were persons who taught, and there were several other names whom I don't remember at the moment. But that was a very challenging course. And what it had to do with was asking students to read certain books, and we would have discussions about those books. We're looking at attitudes, social attitudes, and we're looking at the end for what impact the course had on those social attitudes. We hoped that some of them would be very negative, and we wanted to see whether there were going to be any positive results from the course. Anyway, that was fun, and that was the first course which it constituted how should I put it, a central, a core, if you will, of what Afro-American Studies became at SMU. But there wasn't the money for it. There wasn't the commitment to the program. And so it really should have died earlier. It didn't die it was kept for a long time, but not fed. It was underfunded so that it couldn't really become the kind of a program it should have been. And I understand.
That's an old story.
Yes, it is. Of course. You're absolutely right. This is not unusual. And I think this program is still going on. And that's something. The very longevity of it is significant to me. The fact that SMU has kept it, despite the fact it has to still put money into it.
Yeah.
But African American Studies ought to be integrated in the whole curriculum, not a separate entity.
The subject matter itself.
The subject matter should be. It's like this what is it? This month that they celebrate the Black History Month.
Yeah.
That it's well, I guess some recognition is important, But really, it's for me, it is not at all an adequate way of addressing the history. You don't address it. They're dealing with contemporaneous personnel persons and issues. When there's got to be a historical background, you've got to be brought up to where you are, rather than just start here at the top of the building a steeple before you have any kind of foundation, you see.
And more of black history ought to be built into American history.
This is absolutely correct, absolutely correct, and it ought to be taught. So that's, even when we had the program, I was advocating that the program should be dissolved and the subject matter integrated into the whole curriculum, the various subject areas in sociology, in history, in economics, and so forth.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that it was for you a positive experience, and then you stayed on beyond President Tate's term
Yes.
and into, well, you were here with Paul Hardin too, I guess.
Yes,
the time
yes,
that he
indeed I
here.
was.
And then into Dr. Zumberg's tenure.
Right, that's when I went into the teaching. I can't remember the name of his assistant. I've been trying so desperately to do that, who felt that I was irrelevant, that African American studies was irrelevant, that affirmative action was irrelevant.
Yeah.
And he wanted me out. And so I'll never forget the day that Dr. Zumberg called me into his office and said, Irving, you're irrelevant in substance, so that maybe we ought to leave SMU. You've got a lot of friends downtown, and you can get a job if you want very easily. And I said, well, I do have a lot of friends downtown, but I also have tenure right here at SMU. He was amazed. He didn't realize that I had tenure in political science because I had brought tenure with me from Bishop College, you see. And so then I went over into political science, where I remained. I would like to have started there because I had a chance to interact with students all along. That's the joy of a university, or a college either. Students, really, they're challenging, and you learn from them, and you're stimulated by them. Oh, I should say, and that was why the experience here has been so positive. Was so positive, you see, and that's why I stayed on after I was retired. I retired in, what was it, 94, something like that. I stayed on for 3 more years teaching as an adjunct.
As an adjunct.
And it gradually weaned me away from the school, so it wasn't all just for students, is it?
But your teaching field was public administration.
That's where,
Yeah.
Public administration is a field that I wanted. And I went into public administration because you and I know that the legislature enunciates policy. For example, in New York City, it said, we want to preserve the housing stock of New York City for people. Sounds great. Doesn't mean anything. We directors, big, thick manual like that, we decided what that policy meant. And that's what bureaucrats do. All this legislative business is fine, you've got to have it. But the actual policy is made by bureaucrats who deliver the policy. They decide what it means and what it's going to be.
Yeah.
I knew that. I learned that from my brother. My brother taught it at the Lincoln University in New York, in Pennsylvania some years ago. And he taught political science. And he said, Irving, this is where the implementer of policy is the maker of policy. I never forgot that.
That's a good.
And because in the legislature you are just a part of a group, but as an administrator, and with the law and your regulations in your hand, and you decide what the regulations are going to be, that's it. And that's why the landlords in New York hated me. Let me tell you a little incident which was I find still so amusing, and I'm sorry I don't have the little brochure that they put out showing me as a devil, whipping landlords and things like that. The police came to my office, which is a loft office, one day and one evening, and he said that we're going to be here early tomorrow morning. What time do you get to work? I said I get around 8 o'clock. The office opened around 9, but I always got there early. And he said, we're going to be here early because you're going to have a demonstration by landlords. And I said, this is amazing. So at 8 o'clock, at 9 o'clock promptly, the landlords came with their signs We hate Baker. Baker is an enemy of landlords. Assassinate him. Now, Jeannie was home, my wife,
Yes.
whom you know so well, with a 2.5-month-old baby. And she saw this on TV.
Oh, my.
And she was devastated with
terrified.
fear and
Yeah,
terrified. And I'm upstairs looking down on this to-do,
It was all at the street level.
all at the street level, and I'm above the street level, you see. At 10 o'clock that morning, the students from Columbia came down with their signs. Baker is our friend. We like him. He's fair. And drove, in my volume, drove the landlords away.
I'll declare.
And all this was on TV.
What a testimony.
Columbia was a very terrible landlord. They were one of my, and they were a part of my district, and I kept on them forever and ever.
Yeah.
And battled them because they refused to provide the kind of housing accommodation for their students that the students were paying for, and they were paying big dollars too. So I often think about that. That's a positive. You see, it sounds like a negative, but it's really a positive.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you told that story a few times to your classes
In public administration.
public administration,
Yes, yes. How important it is to be a public administrator.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then another one, which is a very important anecdote, which I think you ought to hear. This landlord called the office one afternoon and said that he had gotten a notice of various kinds of deterioration in the building, you see, and lack of services. An inspector had written of big stuff. So he called and wanted to see the director. And so my secretary, one of them, gave him to me on the phone. And I said, okay. Now, do you know New York at all?
Oh, yes, I lived there 5 years.
Oh.
I went to Columbia University graduate
Oh,
school. But I lived
fine.
over in Brooklyn, so I
I
didn't.
see. Well, that's hinterland. But at the end of the island north, up in Spuyten Duyvil section, up near
Yes.
Bronxville.
Yes.
Okay. That's very, very fancy housing. Well, this landlord say, Mr. Director, I have a beautiful building. And I've always had a beautiful building until the niggers moved in.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, why don't you come in and chat with me? So we made an appointment. Neil, when my office was served as my conference room as well as office, a large area, and I can see that man right this minute standing at the door frozen when he saw Irving Baker. You see?
Another one.
So he came in and I said, we're going to go to your building right now, and I want to see whether or not my inspector's report is accurate. So we got into his car, and we drove up there. And there are 106 families in the building, 2 black families.
Oh, my.
2 black families. He had just bought the building, and he was heavily mortgaged, and so he was neglecting the building. So I told him I didn't really care about what his social attitudes were. All I wanted him to do was to provide for tenants a fair value for the rent they were paying. That was one of the best buildings in my district, because I used to go several times just to check on it. Beautiful building. Mm-hmm. He maintained it marvelously.
Yeah.
That's positive, you see?
Right. Right.
You say right.
Well, the personal touch makes the difference there, doesn't it?
Indeed it does. Indeed it does.
Even if he was shocked when he met you.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
But no, we became cordial after that. It was that was good. But all that prepared me for this. Mm-hmm. That was simply preparing me to come to this kind of situation down here. You see, I wasn't aware of it then, but I realized
you had a perspective other than the academic perspective to bring to bear
I think so.
on public administration.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And that's why I'm so sorry that SMU lost it. And I think SMU ought to have a public administration right now. Mm. Public policy is fine, and they do a wonderful job over at Arlington.
Yes.
But public policy, and they do a job here, which is good, but they need public administration right here, because the bureaucrat is not going to go away. He can't go away. No. And it is he or she who determines what policy means and is. And this is always going to be that way. It is not going to change, because the policymakers cannot administer. and will not administer.
And we probably have the local counterparts of the New York landlords here also.
Oh, of course, of course you do.
Yeah.
I'm not involved now with any housing groups. At first I was, but I've just been so preoccupied with other things now that I just haven't. And what SMU did was to maintain, command all of my time and love and attention. Teaching. I was on the national board of the Easter Seal Society.
Of what society?
Easter Seal Society.
Easter Seal.
So I resigned that when I came full time in the political science department, because traveling, they have week-long conferences, well, sometimes 2-week conferences, and they often have meetings that they want you to attend, weekend meetings, and I just couldn't take the time away from study and so forth.
Yeah.
And so I've had to resign other kinds of activities. I was on the Bar Association here, on the grievance committee of the Bar Association. That took a lot of time.
Yeah.
But it was frustrating, though, because there were 14 of us and 7 attorneys. No, they had a majority of maybe 9 attorneys, and then 7 laypersons or 4 or 5 laypersons.
Yeah.
And this is District 6, anyhow. And when a lawyer came before the committee, having committed some grievous injury to his client, why they didn't want to do the kind of thing we wanted, disbarment. Most of the persons were non-lawyers, but they wanted a public reprimand or something like that, and they didn't want to do the kinds of things which should be done. Sometimes the lawyers had become alcoholics, and they were just a danger to the profession.
Yeah.
But they wanted continuous self-regulation, and they determined what the penalty should be, you see. So I got to decide that after 4 years, that was enough.
I would think so.
Yeah. So, but all of that was useful in teaching.
Sure.
All of those experiences, you see.
It was 1974 that you became a part of the Department of Political Science. 69 to 74.
Yes, 74.
So you
74.
were about 5 years in the office as assistant to the president,
Right,
and then
right.
went into the department.
Right.
Can you comment a bit on what the department was in those days?
The department was weak. It was weak only not because of the strength of the individuals in terms of their scholarship, but weak because of leadership. That's the sense that I got. The leadership was not sufficiently demanding, hadn't really formulated the kind of plan or goals and direction for the department, which were clearly defined. And so it's sort of drifting. And Dr. Ippolito came, and it's around the same time, and he seemed to have had some, and not only seemed to, he did have some very clearly defined goals and objectives, and he brought in some strong people, and he was able to get the confidence of the dean, and to get the financial support and so forth. It was then that the public administration program died, because the money, it was tied to political science as a part of it, not as a separate entity, but a part of the department. And Ippolito wanted the more money for the direction of the department, which was sound. And so we discontinued the public administration program, you see.
UT Arlington kind of beat us to the punch on that aspect of the program, didn't they?
Yes, and also North Texas State. North Texas State developed they didn't have public policy. They have, and still have, a public administration program.
Oh, do they?
A very good one. David Glass was when I left here, he was the director of the program, or the chairperson of the program at the time. But it's a separate entity. It had been a part of political science. It was struggling. And somehow or other, they got it out of political science and made it a separate entity, and it began to grow. But it's a very strong program. It was a very strong program then. I haven't been in touch with it for several years.
Yeah.
But in Arlington, what they have is a very, very excellent public policy program. And so that if we know students will want public policy, that's where they can go and get a good. And also, if they want public administration, they can go to North Texas State.
If I'm remembering correctly, Sidney Reagan headed a drive to try to get that public policy program developed
Yes.
here at SMU.
Yes.
And just didn't get the support for it. It turned up at.
Yeah,
Arlington.
I'm surprised. No, I'm not. I shouldn't be surprised. Maybe in a more metropolitan, a more urban area, you find a conceptualization of policy, public policy. But Dallas is a peculiar city. It's a city like none other I've ever had a chance to in terms of its being a city. It's suburban city. It's not the kind of urban kind of city that Pittsburgh is, for example,
Yeah, yeah.
or Cleveland,
Yeah.
or certainly New York, you see,
Or Atlanta.
or Atlanta. That's exactly right. And so the perspectives on policy, I think, in the universities are very, very different. Now, I'm surprised how, I don't know, I was trying to recollect the person who chaired that policy. Do you know do you remember his name?
I don't remember. No, I sure don't.
At any rate, he was evidently a very good politician, to be able to get the state to see that as a very, very important entity, separate. But I still believe that public administration, the interpreter of policy, is vitally important in any academic environment.
Well, I was interested by your comment that the interpreter actually is the implementer of that policy.
Yes, absolutely. Isn't that your sense?
Yes, that's what I understood you to be stressing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now you retired in '94, but you stayed on in an adjunct relationship for another 3 years. or something
97,
like
I think
that.
it was, right.
But now, I'm sure that you have not been idly sitting by in the interim. What are you up to now?
I have a company which was incorporated on the 7th of July this year. It started before, and I have some material for you to share, with which I will share with you. It has to do with reading and learning. It has to do with grounding children in or attempting to develop a love for reading and a love for writing, a love for communicating, and also a love for grammar. Now, that sounds...
In other words, you want to communicate to them the skills that you have mastered.
No,
I
the
can say
skills the skills that I subscribe to. I'll tell you why. These are the tools that are absolutely essential. Now, Ebonics, you know something about know anything about Ebonics?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You can be understood.
Yeah.
But you see, the majority of, of the community does not understand Ebonics. So that to learn Ebonics may be fun for some in stuff, but it's not the tool to use in the larger society, you see. And it's not going to help you to get where you want to go. These guys who are behind these video businesses here, whatever you call them, the cameras, I guess, they couldn't make it if they had to deal only with Ebonics. They wouldn't be where they are now, you see. So I want black kids early on to begin to master these tools, to speak well, to think well. That's one point. The other thing that's involved in the program is setting up study centers on church campuses. And I select church campuses because I want an environment where there can be some quiet. See, many kids in the inner city don't have a quiet environment for study. And quiet is important. People talk about, oh, I can study with the radio. Sure, you can't, but you need quiet for study. And the church campuses provide that kind of environment. And I'm thrilled with the kind of responses that I'm getting.
Good.
Now, this is for the middle schoolers and the high school students. Now, while we have them there, what we attempt to do is to to indoctrinate them with the idea of college, that high school is not enough, and that if college seems...
And increasingly, that's becoming the point to emphasize. Yeah.
Yes, I think so. I think so. And not to worry about the fact that I can't afford it, because what we're attempting to do is to find resources to help the students get some support, you see? This has got to be done, Neil. This has got to be done. And so this is what I'm involved with. And this is something I should have been doing a long time ago.
Now, this is a non-profit company that you have founded.
Absolutely.
And are there other people? I'm sure there are other people that are cooperating with
Oh,
you in
yes,
this.
yes. My wife and my daughters. My wife was a librarian. She's retired from Green Hill.
Yes.
And my daughter, she went to Amherst and then to UT, and she's at UT. I didn't tell you this. She's now got a job at UT. They hired her in the counseling area,
UT Austin.
UT Austin, yeah, career development. And she's also on the board. And the chap who happens to be white, John Ellis, he's on the board. He brings the real estate know-how. And we are looking at a building that's on 35. It was formerly a Luby's. We're looking at that as a possible site where we will set up a shop. What we're doing now is just using the churches and helping them to develop programs, and we will operate the program for a time, then turn it over to them to operate for themselves, you see. But
yours is a startup program in the churches. You start it up and then they continue.
Yeah, we want them to exactly, because we don't have the personnel to.
Sure.
We're in this process of expanding the board, selecting persons who are going to be able. Have a couple of former students here. Linda Catlin, she was a graduate student in public administration. Her husband Tom White, Linda Catlin White, Tom White, he finished at North Texas State. They're living in Colorado Springs. They are interested and they are very helpful. She's in anthropology, has a doctorate in anthropology, cultural anthropology. In short, we're trying to assemble a board which will study the students and the environment and attempt to provide direction for the students as they develop. We want to hold them from as early as we possibly can to the time that they go to college. So this is it sounds ambitious, doesn't it? But it really doesn't. It falls into place. It follows very nicely. And the churches, what I'm really thrilled about is the fact that the ministers are very excited about it too.
How many different churches do you have?
Well, 3 right now.
Three
committed now.
Yeah.
But the reception from the others, and I've written to about 50, I guess, but the reception from the others has not been negative. That's the thing.
Yeah.
At least I've started them to thinking they may not want to use us, which is fine. So long as they get something started in this direction, that's all we care. We just want to get something started and underway, you see.
Well, it certainly is a laudable effort and right on target.
I think it's necessary. Mm-hmm. It's something that we've got to give back.
Do you have any estimate of how many youngsters that you've brought into the program?
80 so far.
80.
Yeah. Which isn't a hurry. That's only a small number.
Well, yeah, but it's a substantial beginning.
Yeah, but we see ourselves also as ancillary to the public institution. We believe in public education.
Yeah.
We're not trying to set up private entities at all. We want public education. And we work with the classroom teachers too, you know. They identify students and the weaknesses. We have a tutoring program too, where they're weak, and we attempt to address that weakness in the after-school study program. We also are beginning to focus now on test taking. Some of the students have done so poorly in these TOS tests, you know. So what we're doing is dividing practice, and also we want to develop, we haven't done this yet, but to develop skills and test taking, preparing students for SAT, SAT tests, you know, and in short, give them the experience of taking a test, thinking through a test,
Without
doing
being
a test.
terrified by it.
Exactly, that's it. Without being frightened by the test, and it's been just so completely preoccupying and
Well, I
absorbing
remember-
absorbing.
Yeah, well, I'm sure absorbing, yes. But what a laudable enterprise. I salute you for what you're attempting to do there.
And you know, again, I come back to SMU. SMU, you know, do they still have the LEC program, the Learning Enhancement Center program here at SMU?
I don't know, but I suspect they do.
That was designed for the students who were athletes, the students in Meadows, the students who were admitted to the university, not with reservations. They knew they were bright students, but students who might need some help along in areas other than what their specific interests were.
They had these special skills, but perhaps not the...
Exactly. And that center became the center for all students. Well, do you know much about it at all?
Not much in detail, but...
Well, just let me say this.
aware,
The thing grew. It started with just a few persons, a few professors, and when I left here, I think there's some 8 people who worked in the center.
Is that so?
Exactly, and they did all kinds of things. Helped with tests and so forth. Not with tests, with papers. Helped them to show them, not do the papers for them, of course, but show them how papers should be
Hone
done.
their writing skills.
Exactly. And I said, this is, if here in a university with bright students, if this is necessary here, we know that in the inner city, where the education has been poor, where there's been unequal education, they need that there.
Do you have a geographical concentration here that in the South Dallas area?
South Dallas and Oak Cliff.
Oak Cliff.
Yeah, those are the 2 areas. And we have students from Paul Quinn who are in the reading program, who are readers. But they're reading enhancement program. They're not tutors at all.
Paul Quinn, the successor to Bishop College.
The successor to Bishop College, that's correct.
Yes.
We have some retired teachers who are at Crestmore King, United Methodist Church. That's on Marsalis. Retired teachers who are tutoring, who provide tutoring classes, and they are enthusiastic and are doing a splendid job, you see. So I'm going to be calling on SMU a little bit later on for some student personnel also. We used to have a program, I guess you still have it, where students assisted, they got credit for this too.
Yeah,
students.
I think that still is.
Well, that's wonderful, wonderful.
Indeed, I think there's some courses in which it's a requirement that they get out and do some public service, community service.
Is that so? Oh, good. Well, SMU has been this kind of, how do I put it, generator of enthusiasm and energy and direction and thinking about what I ought to be doing. One of the reasons that I wanted to be at SMU also is because I'm a firm believer in integration, not as an end, but as a means to an end, you see. And I felt that...
I remember hearing you make that quote some time back, yes.
Yeah, I still believe that.
I subscribe to it fully, yes.
I still believe that. And I believed, and I still believe this too, that by teaching white students and giving them a chance to be exposed to a Negro, I know you don't use that nerve, that's antiquated, African American, but it was an opportunity also to change perceptions, because we know how important perceptions are, and also how much persons have been indoctrinated. I will never forget do they still have Parents' Day? When parents come?
Yes, yes, still.
Okay, good. And I would always tell them, please bring your parents. And I would have more parents sometimes than the students. That's not true. But I wanted the parents to come to, I wanted them to see me. And I wanted to ask them questions, not to embarrass them, but to get their thinking. I'd never ask them kind of questions they couldn't answer, you see. But I would always call on them to give some response. And it was amazing how much they were pleased by this opportunity to talk before the students or to talk to the students, you see.
And you're talking about both white and black
Both
parents here.
Well, I see. My misfortune was to have only an occasional black student. Always, the majority or solely were they white. And that was good. That was good because it gave them a chance. It did, well, good in the sense that what I was concerned about, they got a chance to interact with a black without another black in class, so that if they wanted to say something, and I would tell them this, say what you think. I'm impervious to your attitudes. That doesn't make any difference to me at all. I want to know what you think in order to be able to get at how you feel. And there'll be no penalties. I would always make no reprisals at all for bad thoughts. But at any rate,
Don't take it out on the kids.
exactly, exactly. At any rate, I had many fun experiences with students. But I wanted them also, there was a serious objective, to begin to change their perceptions, not to see blacks or minorities at all of any group as a monolithic mass.
Right,
You
right.
see, as individuals only, you see. And so, here we are.
Breaking down stereotypes about other people is one of the principal aims of education in this day, I think.
Exactly,
That
exactly.
has to do not only with other races in our country, but with the other people in the world.
I'm glad you said that. I think the Nation has, in this week's, the Nation magazine, you know the magazine,
Yes.
the confrontation of ignorance is right on the front page.
Is that so?
That's a I think that's what it is. I think I'm quoting it correctly. But the lack of knowledge creates this kind of
Absolutely.
absurd
Yeah.
kind of result. I say absurd because any kind of inhumanity, in my judgment, is absurd. Any kind of inhumanity. That's the bombing, of the using of the plane as a bomb, and the dropping of bombs. See, that's indefensible.
Yeah. Well, we live in a difficult world,
Yes.
and the educational process seems to me, the principal hope that we have for developing people who are able to make some change in that divided world. And I'm so pleased to hear what you're doing through your company with the underprivileged young people.
They're not so much they are underprivileged in the sense that they're not getting all that they should get.
Yeah.
I was trying to recollect do you remember the play As You Like It? When when Shakespeare talks about adversity,
Yes.
using adversity in a
Sweet are
positive.
the uses of adversity. Wasn't that the line? Something like that?
Yes. What I'm trying to do also, what we're trying to do, I should say, is to get children to understand that adversity can be used as a positive rather than just a negative, you see.
Yeah.
So the lacks, if you have in school, if it rains in the school, if the school building leaks, if you got bad asbestos, if you have teachers who are just not really top draw, who don't like you particularly, that's adversity. But look, you come here in the afternoon and after school, and we will help you to develop the kind of self-esteem that we want you to have, that you must have in order to be able to confront the society.
So this is an afternoon weekday program primarily.
Yes. And on weekends, if we want to have special trips to do this or that, you see, to get some sense of the city. But when you mention education is the answer, if we can teach education holistically,
Yes.
then yes.
Yes, I agree.
It must be perceived that way,
Yeah.
but only that way.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's not going to be effective. And I'm not sure we do a good job at that.
Well, I think probably I share your reservation.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to say about the university, the community, about your own career? I am all the more impressed, having talked with you here today, by what impressed me, first of all, about you. Very articulate and very thoughtful. And
Well, thank you,
you
Neil.
have retained those qualities, and I continue to admire them, and certainly wish you well in what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I should come to the university more often. I know I get notices with respect to the retirement meetings.
Faculty
Faculty
Association.
Right.
We welcome you into that.
But I'd like to see what's going on in the university. I'd like to know what's going on. Now, do you discuss those sorts of things at the meetings?
Some, yes. And we sometimes have speakers to come from various parts of the university.
Good. Yeah, I've been remiss in that, only because I've been so preoccupied with other stuff.
Yeah, sure, I understand.
But I'm glad that SMU is here, and I mean that very sincerely, that it's a part of this community. And I'm glad of the impact that it had on me. And I'm glad that we stayed in Dallas. We were not going to stay in Dallas. As a matter of fact, I guess when I began to know that I was going to be in Dallas was after 4 years. One of my colleagues, whose name you would know very well, he went to Baruch College in New York and became the president thereof. And he wanted me to come as assistant president. And the children, two little children, were still very small. And it would have meant that, since I like a less intense environment, living up in Westchester or maybe Lower Connecticut and commuting every day. So I told him that I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
That's when I decided I was going to be here. And I'm not sorry one bit. The children have grown up fine. One is in Austin. The other daughter is in Missouri. She manages the housing business. They have now housing for students, which the dormitory is separate. It's a separate entity.
Yeah.
It's Continental, is it, or
Privately owned and managed.
privately owned and managed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she manages that, and she loves it. She was at North Texas State as a assistant manager of their housing, and she learned a lot. And then they snatched her away, and she's there. And so I am happy for them and proud of them, and all of that is a part of being in this environment. You see, part of having stayed. You see,
Our conversation today makes me even happier that I had some role in keeping you here.
You really did, Neil. You really did.
You have meant a great deal to this university and obviously to the larger community. And I want to follow with interest what you're doing in this new enterprise.
Oh, I would like to.
It,
See, I'm not going to ask you to be on the board. See,
no, thank you.
As I know you got. But I think of SMU in terms of Joe Harris, Willis Tate, and you. You are the persons who made it possible for me to come. And I say made it possible because I believed that you and they were committed to the universities being open.
Well, I appreciate being included in that company. And let me say to you that we appreciate your being at this university and all that you've contributed to it.
Oh, I thank you very
And
much.
we wish you well as time goes on, and may there
Thank
be
you.
a lot of it.
Oh, I certainly hope so. Thanks so very much.
Well, I guess with that we can bring to a close our chat here, but let's look for other opportunities to continue it in perhaps other venues.
I would hope so. And I'm going to make a point of getting to those meetings, at least some of them,
Yes.
the retired faculty
Well, there's
luncheons.
just really two big ones a year, so maybe you can work that into your crowded schedule. We hope that you can.
I shall.
Good.
I shall. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.